Hey gang, listen, I just posted a longer than normal video on using Modelfiles to customize language model output. It's a slower pace. There's a lot of commentary and examples included in there. If you're interested, go check it out. But I thought I would follow it up with a quick TLDR on really what are Modelfiles, why are they interesting, and just simply how to use them. Hey, this is Jeff from the future. Listen, turns out this TLDR version wasn't quite as TLDR-ish as I had initially hoped, but I will say this is more concise. The examples are better. So screw the other video, stick with this one. This is going to do you. You probably already noticed this. I left TLDR in the title. Probably gets more clicks. Sue me. Okay, so Modelfiles are paired with AI models to help instruct the model on how it should return content, right? For language models, it's what should this content look like? And I use this phrase, what it should look like, very loosely. It's not just visual, right? It's also in instructing it how to think about the answer or the response in terms of like what it's sending back. So let me give you a few examples just so that you can visualize. For one thing, just on the visual example, right? You may want a response to particular prompts to come back as a single paragraph summary with maybe a series of bullets, no more than 5, of key points. And every response should come back that way, right? Or it could be something that's a little bit more structured in the sense that imagine you're a writer or you're on a marketing team and you put together a variety of different types of copy assets, blog posts, customer testimonials, product descriptions, social media posts, whatever, right? Each of these has their own flow, their own organization, their own outline of sorts, and how you approach them. All of that can be packaged in separate model files. So you throw an idea at it for one versus the other, and you get information back in that format. A third way to think about this is that you can go even more structured. Say that you want to have something sent back in a particular data type or data format, right? It could come back as JSON or XML if you're feeding something straight to a website where you can apply a style sheet and make it look pretty, right? Or maybe it comes back as a text delimited or comma delimited file because it's going to stream into some application or a spreadsheet, right? So you want the response to come back in a format that can be used by something else. So that's just on the sort of visually how the output looks. You could also take it a step further. Think about like not so much how it visually looks, but how it sounds, like the tone, the style, right? So tune AI to your particular writing style. You could use Modelfiles, creating a whole bunch of snippets of text in a particular style with a particular voice, so that everything that comes back sounds like it matches what you've described. A more interesting example of this is really, taking something like, you think about generating interview questions. Imagine that you have a model file set up to be able to take in a job description and hiring manager interests, and you throw in a resume of somebody in particular, and it creates a list of interview questions specific to the role, but also accounting for what's in that applicant's resume and cover letter. You could also use Modelfiles to simply pass in instructions on how to think about what to respond with. So I'm going to show you in a few minutes how I put together a meal plan, a model file, right? You throw in a couple of pieces of information about a main ingredient, a cuisine, whatever, and it generates an entire meal off of that. It's got a main course, relevant sides, balancing proteins and starches and vegetables. It tells you all the ingredients, the instructions. It does a wine pairing. It gives you an interesting description of the whole meal and so forth. That works because I fed it a whole bunch of instructions about what kind of information I'm looking for, not necessarily what does it look like. Now, a more business-oriented example is imagine you took your sales data from last month, you dropped it in, and outputs an executive summary that you need for a stand-up, or a series of slides intended for a presentation at an all-hands, or your wins and your losses, your key strategies over the next quarter, and action items, like all extracted from just the data. Right? I can imagine that would save somebody an awful lot of time. Again, this is by putting in instructions about how to think about the data, how to think about the response, not so much necessarily about the look and feel of that response, but just what's in the response. So there's an infinite number of ways you can use this. And I'm finding just by going through this process of playing around with this, that more and more ideas come to mind. So what I'm hoping for here is to just tell you how to get started using these things, because once you do, you'll see how it relates to your task, your job, your role, your team, and you can take it from there. Okay, so there are a number of ways that you can actually implement this. You could go straight to APIs and write some code for it, but I don't want to focus so much on engineers here per se. I'm looking more at business users who want to be able to spin up tools to help make their jobs easier, more efficient, and so on, right? So I'm focused on this on using tools to apply this. And in particular, I'm using a tool called Ollama, which is available here at ollama.ai. I'll leave a link. But Ollama is a framework for running and managing language models, particularly those that are downloaded and installed locally. So meaning you don't have to actually go through OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever using their APIs and running things in the cloud. And running things locally isn't necessarily specific to Modelfiles, but I think there's a couple of benefits that I think are particularly interesting, especially for individuals or teams in a business that have concerns about costs and privacy and that kind of stuff. Running things locally, first off, avoids just the cost of using these cloud models. If your team is going to be using AI a lot in their daily tasks, you're going to be generating a lot of content, and that cost adds up pretty quick, to be honest. Secondly, you might have company data that you're trying to weave together with AI, and you may or may not have PII or even really particularly sensitive data, but you may not like the idea of passing your company information, to the cloud, to a particular company, or being used to train future models and so on. So keeping things local is not only convenient and cost effective, but it also is a little bit more secure potentially. Now, before we dig into the weeds, you may be thinking, look, I use ChatGPT. Everything that you're describing makes sense, but I kind of feel like I could use ChatGPT to implement those, right? So what's the issue? Well, I don't know that there's much of an issue per se, but I do think that there are a couple of limitations. I use ChatGPT all the time. It's easy to get to. It's a pretty simple and intuitive interface, right? I can spin it up whenever I want to get some answers or do whatever I need to do. But there are a couple limitations, right? For me, this is a very individual experience, right? I'm using ChatGPT here. It's just me. You're using ChatGPT. If we're on a team, others are all using ChatGPT in their own spaces. There's no real easy way to share resources, share tools, share approaches or techniques across the team. And it's not really a collaborative experience, right? And or at least not just yet, perhaps in time. You could even do things like adding custom instructions, which is very similar to what I'm talking about with Modelfiles. In a sense, I can give it a context for why I'm running a particular request, the format of things that I want sent back to me in. This is JSON. If I were to go and use this, I should get back the response in that particular format. See, it's returning back JSON just like I described. It's even included spicy in there, so it's taken that into consideration. But the downside of this, even though this did exactly what I asked it to, I use ChatGPT 80 times a day. I use it to help me write code, help me work on articles, brainstorming ideas. There's no one set of instructions that works across all of these guys, right? So being able to toggle back and forth is not something you can easily do, especially when you have to come in, drill into here and replace this with something else. So there's that limitation. So ChatGPT is great. It's a great tool for certain kinds of tasks. But when you need to be able to share things across the team, when you want to be able to easily toggle from one style to the next or one model file to the next, you need some sort of approach that works a little bit differently. And that's what I'm trying to describe here. Okay, let's come back to Llama. Right. Llama is a free open source framework for running your language model. Anybody can use it. It's free, right? And it's super easy to install. It's a one-click install. It takes seconds. Once it's done, you're up and running, ready to go. I will say it does run natively in a command line interface. Right? So if you're a little squeamish about working in terminal or at a command prompt, don't worry. In a couple minutes, we'll get to how you can access things outside in the real world, right? And if you're talking about having a team of people working together on things, that's going to be more appropriate, obviously, because you don't want your team working in command, at a command line when they're not super comfortable with it necessarily. So for now, I already have it installed. If I type in Llama, I can see all the things that Llama can do, which is not very many. But this is going to help us run and manage all of our language models that we want to use, including the ones that we tuned with Modelfiles. So to begin with, how do you get some? You just simply type Llama pull, and then you type in the name of a language model that you want to use. GPT 3.5 Turbo, Llama 2, whatever, right? And what it'll do is it'll automatically download it from Hugging Face or some repository and install it for you. Takes a minute, but then once it's done, you're ready to go. You can start using it. Now, once you have your models all set up locally, I'll just show you the ones that I have. I have Llama 2, a couple versions of Mistral, and so on. These have already been downloaded and installed on my machine. So most of the time, you'll just be interacting with these models, and how you do that is just running them with the run command. So let me just show you how that works. Not run. Let's do Mistral. Instruct. All right, pretty easy. And then you enter a prompt. A response, just like working with ChatGPT. I was created by Mistral AI team, cutting edge company based in Paris. Okay, fair enough, right? So, but the thing about all of these models that I have is that they're all general models. They know a lot of stuff, but they're not tuned to something specific, right? So this is where the Modelfiles come in. And so what I want to focus on is this guy here, create. This allows us to use a model file with a model to be able to create the customizations that we're looking for. The way that you create the model files is you start with just a text document. I've got several here. I'm just going to show you some of the format. This is not the model file. These are just the instructions that go into creating the model file. So let's take a look at this format. So first off, I have some comments here at the top. This is not interpreted by the code in any way, right? It could be whatever you want, but it's a good practice to include a description, maybe how to install it and run it and that kind of stuff, whatever. It's just a best practice. From here on out, this is what's interpreted by the code and what will become what's in your model file. So first we say from some language model. You specify the model that you want to pair your model file with. That's important and required. The following parameters, we won't get into the details of these necessarily right here. They are optional. There are defaults, so if you don't want to use them, if you want to just go with the defaults, you can totally do that. Again, these are all optional. I'm including them just to show that you can add these configuration information in here if you want, but the real meat of it is in this system block. Now here, this is really simple when it comes down to it, right? You might have much longer details that are in here to really tune it, but this is simple. Just for a case of an example, you're an expert marketer specializing in tweets. When you're given a topic, something you add through a prompt, provide an ordered list of 10 perfect tweets on that topic and make sure to include relevant hashtags. Right, so some instructions in here. So I enter a prompt and I should get 10 tweets back with hashtags. So let's see, what do we do with that? Again, that's not the model file. Those are just the instructions. So all I have to do is type llama create. Let's give it a name. This is how we'll refer to it once we have it built. Type F, presuming that means file. We'll drag in this guy and then run it. That was pretty quick. Now I've played around with a whole bunch of different kinds of model files, using different models to associate them with, different amounts of information in the model files. It always seems to be this quick. So this is super easy. If you're iterating, you run it, see what you get. If you want to tweak it, you can go change that text file and just iterate very, very quickly and easily. So if I type in Ollama list, these are all my models. You can see now that I've got my tweets in here as well. And I run this the same way that I ran the other one a moment ago, right? So as far as this is concerned, it considers it to be a whole new model specific to itself. So let's see how that works. So we type Ollama run tweets and enter. Okay, got my back in my prompt. And let's see. Let's put in a prompt and it should give me back a bunch of tweets. Let's do new product release. Playful puppies. The AI pup. Okay, so I'll hit enter and we should get back a bunch of tweets. All right, there we go. We got our tweets back, and it's occurred to me that I misspelled playful. Let's just pretend market research determined that that spelling is better. Anyways, so how do you iterate? Let's just show that real quick. Let me just bring up that file again, and let's just make a simple change. Do not use any emojis whatsoever. Whoop, come back. Okay, save that guy. Come back to here and back out of this. Rerun that same command to create using the same file that we did before. Run that. There you go. Been updated. On the list, you'll see that that didn't make a copy of the tweets. It just updated it a few seconds ago, right? So you can just do this over and over until you get the model that you're really happy with. So now at this time, let's run this again, start it back up again, and we'll just run the same. You know what? Let's fix that misspelling while we're at it. And then give that a run. Okay, so we got our 10 tweets back. Now, looks like there's a couple of emojis managed to get in here despite our latest iteration. You get the picture, right? You can continue to tweak and so on. So, okay. So what I just did was I ran a whole slew of other definition files through Ollama to create a whole bunch of additional tools that your team could use. This is what I'm getting at when I'm saying that you got a shared computer somewhere and your whole team can access the same tool set, right? These could be anything from business intelligence to customer support and a bunch of other things that I've included in here. But of course, you're still looking at this and saying, look, we're still in terminal. How do we actually access this in a way that is most appropriate for the rest of the team? So one of the things that's actually particularly interesting about Ollama is that all of those models are not just accessible through a command line, but it also exposes them through services, right? So that means that other applications can incorporate these models into them outside somewhere else. Those applications could be a web page or a web app or another kind of application running on the network, a script or whatever. So what I've done is created probably the easiest script, the most simple script to demonstrate that this is true. So I just want to prove that I can access Ollama and the models through something other than the command line here. So first and foremost, I know this is code, And it might seem a little, scary if you are not an engineer, but this is as simple as it gets when it comes to code. If you have somebody who is on your team who's a tinkerer and even an engineer, it would be easy for them to put these together. So at any rate, with this code, this is a Python script that I'll run in the command line. And from this object, I'm able to access the models that I've defined, right? And so in this case, I'm requesting the tweets model that we just made, and it's going to return that back. And now I can pass a prompt to it in the same way that I could from the command line, right? And so I'm taking the output. This is what the model returns, and I'm going to simply print it out to the screen. It's just going to display it in the command line, right? And again, I'm still in the command line here, but this is step one, right? Run my script here. And boom, there we go. There's our tweets. So I can actually access the models through LLM, but through services. So how would I actually make this accessible by the rest of my team? All right. Again, I don't want them to have to come to the command line and run this script. I certainly don't want to have to change this code every time I want to use a different model or put in a different prompt, right? So I want to make this dynamic. So what I did was I converted this to a web service. And so what I've done here, I basically took the exact same script, right, where it just says, give me this model, send in this prompt, and then do something with the response. I made that available here. And I don't want to get into the details because this isn't supposed to be like an engineering sort of demo so much, but what it's doing here with this service is it defines a route, which means that it gave it a URL, kind of like asking for a web page. This is what applications use. They go here to go and pull some information. And then I'm going to pass in two variables, the model and the prompt. So imagine a form where somebody puts in the model that they want to use and the prompt that they want to use, and it's dynamically passed in through this script. But the rest of it is really just almost the exact same thing as what's in that original script. Except, so here I'm requesting a model, but it's dynamic. It's not hard-coded. And the same thing for the output, right? It passes in the prompt from whatever somebody submitted on some form on a website. And it saves that as this variable, and then I'm outputting this. I happen to be converting this to JSON, which is something that works better with websites. So we want to stream this information straight to a website. So I'm putting it into JSON and I can do something with it from there. So what does that front end look like? It looks like this. Here, what I've done is I've added this list of all the models that I added, right? So this is just a drop-down list. Super simple, just HTML. There's also a text area in here. So I can type in my prompt, right? Again, this is how the information, the model, and the prompt are going to be set dynamically. The user selects the model, enters in their prompt, it sends it back to this service here, it dynamically injects it, and then it calls Ollama to be able to run what we've been doing from the command line. It looks like this. Pretty simple website, okay? I admit. But what do we have here? We have our drop down. I got all the models that I've got set up on the server. And then I have a place to enter a prompt. So let's give this a whirl. So let's try this dinner idea as one. Okay, so I'm going to put in, how about chicken, Moroccan, how do you spell that? Moroccan, yeah. Tagine. All right. Sounds good. Let's give this a shot. Now, what's interesting about this one, before I run it, is that here it's not so much describing the data format or how it should look necessarily, but it's giving it a lot of instructions on how to figure out a meal. So in this particular case, it's saying, I know I'm going to send in three things: cuisine, cooking method, and a main ingredient. And it's going to build a whole meal around this. So I'm going to have a main dish, a couple of sides, maybe a wine pairing, break down all the ingredients and give me the, all the instructions on how to cook it, and give me a description and a fancy name for it, blah, blah, blah. Like all those instructions are baked into that model file. And so I don't necessarily care what it looks like. If I wanted to, I could say put it into a particular format as well if I wanted to suck it into a website. But I'm just basically giving it instructions here, how to think about the prompt, how to figure out what to give me back. Okay, so let's give it a shot. Okay, we got ourselves a meal. Spiced chicken tagine with apricot couscous. Okay, sounds good. Got a main dish. Spiced carrots. Moroccan flatbread. Oh, homemade. Nice. Cucumber tomato salad. Nice. Wine recommendation and a description. Nice. All right. Just for fun, let's take a picture of this guy. All right? Because I've got a mid-journey thing in here. So let's just drop the description in. Let's see what we get. Okay. Look at that. So we've got ourselves a prompt. So for this, what I did was I put together a model file that was made up of instructions of how to tune a prompt specific for Midjourney to generate a high definition photograph. It includes details on, the camera, how to take the shot, angles, and so on and so forth, right? So what we've done is taken that, merged it with our chicken tagine feast, and looks like we've got references to some of the food and so on, and the setting and the cinematic effect, all that kind of good stuff. So let's just give it a run, see how it looks. So in case you didn't know, Midjourney runs in Discord at the moment. I guess I hear that they're working on a website. But for the moment, it runs in here. So we're just going to drop this in and see what we get. Okay. Got ourselves some pictures. Have a look. Oh. Here's our chicken tagine meal. That's not too bad. Some of these look a little AI driven, but I don't know. It's pretty tasty. Now, of course, you could always iterate on this. But it's a good starting point for basically no effort, right? Anyways, there you have it. So here, this is something that is probably much more tuned to working with a team, right? You send everybody to a particular location. This could be on, again, a shared computer that allows people to be able to access on your network. Perhaps it doesn't go out to the cloud. It's not meant for end customers. It's not intended to scale, but it's just a place where somebody can come in here and choose the various tools that they want to work with and enter some of their prompts and get things back in a particular way. One of the other things that occurred to me while I was putting this together is that, you could also change this to a multi-select, something that maybe even chains models together. Thinking of yourself as like a marketing team, and you want to generate an article and a series of tweets and pictures for each of those tweets, right? You chain those things together to be able to take the output of one and add it to a prompt in the other one, similar to what we did here with this meal, right? Taking the description and passing it into Midjourney. But you can imagine how beneficial this could be for a team that has to stay connected to each other, be consistent with each other. Do you have content guidelines or style guidelines, and make sure that everybody has access similarly. So there's a lot that can be done here for sure. For me, a lot of the interest in AI I have is on allowing businesses to be able to make use of AI and work as a partner with humans in the mix, right? To stay relevant, it's really important to really understand how to work with the technology, and the ability for AI to blur the lines between tool makers and tool users is allowing people to be able to spin up things like this, right? Making use of AI, but being very meaningful for your teams. Like, your business, you know your role, you know what's important for your job. So how do you actually go and continue to stay relevant? It's by using AI as a partner and bringing that to the rest of your teams. I hope you found this interesting and informative. Like I said, just playing around with this in the few hours that I spent building some of these got the gears going. I thought of so many different other approaches for this. You'll see the same once you start tinkering. So thanks a lot. Like and subscribe. If you have any other questions or comments, throw them in the comments. I keep up on those things. So thanks a lot. Bye.